CitizenCon, that yearly convention where CIG discussed the long-in-development game Star Citizen. This year was a little different as it was a digital event due to the pandemic. Now, whilst that may have affected the scale and presentation, it technically shouldn't have had an impact on the available information. Additionally, as always, there was an impressive looking demo of the future content, so let's jump in and take a look. One of the biggest parts about the future of Star Citizen very much lays in the next star systems. 2019 CitizenCon Keynote introduced the first look at a jump point, along with a glimpse at the concept of the Pyro System. The 2021 Keynote went fully into the new star system, taking a close look at one of its planets, Pyro 3. Pyro, of course, still has no release date, but with its heavy dependency upon server meshing and CIG confirming that it will release with version 4.0 of the game, it seems quite likely, quite possible, that Pyro won't release until late 2022. Earlier, of course, is still possible, but seems unlikely. Anyway, the presentation included a demo mission playthrough on the new outpost settlement areas. All in all, this looked extremely impressive. I've covered this in 2 previous videos, which you can find linked below. The rest of the CitizenCon panels took a heavy focus on the various levels of the tech behind the game. CIG are working on new rendering technology for Star Citizen, and this is based upon Vulkan. The new Gen 12 renderer then will be multi-core and should bring some performance gains to the game. CIG went into depth on this subject with a dedicated panel. As with the other panels, this was generally very technical. The gist of the new tech, however, is that it will completely replace the old renderer. As with all games, Star Citizen scenes are made from multiple layers. Now, with the current rendering technology, all the layers are generated entirely for each frame, so basically generated together. With Gen 12, things will change a whole lot, as the tech has the ability to render each layer independently. This takes advantage of modern multi-core CPUs and overall speeds up the process. The bottom line here is that the performance will improve, as the game will be much better suited or much better situated to render each frame efficiently. Use of Vulkan also means that the game will be able to use as many cores on your CPU as possible. In turn, this means that CIG will probably be able to push the visuals of the games and the graphics much further. There's no date yet on when Gen 12 will be fully implemented, however CIG have stated that parts of it will come in the next update, which is patch 3.15. Server meshing is a technology that you will almost have certainly heard CIG talk about for many years now. It's a tipping point that many fans of the game are waiting for. So, what is server meshing, and more importantly, when will it arrive? The CitizenCon panel answered just one of these 2 questions. So, server meshing is in many ways exactly what the name implies. It's the ability for Star Citizen to talk across multiple servers, allowing players to seamlessly transition from one instance to another. Now, this is important as it dramatically opens up what is possible for the game by ensuring that a player can engage with their friends or enemies in a reliable fashion without huge amounts of lag or without overburdening the servers. Server meshing achieves this by essentially placing a player inside a container. This container stores everything the player needs at any given moment, and this may be a planet, station, base, ship, NPC, weapon, or indeed any combination or all of the above and more. The short of it is that these containers are not required to hold everything. They only have to hold what the player needs. Players within the same locations effectively share the same container. If a server comes under load, then these containers can then be scaled up and copied across to another server or shard. From the player's point of view, this should happen invisibly, as to all intents and purposes the new shard is an exact replica of the persistent world. Further, anything that takes place on the new shard also updates the persistent world. So server meshing will be rolled out in phases, with static server meshing coming first. Now, unsurprisingly perhaps, but certainly very disappointing, is that there's still no release date on any of this. The public roadmap shows the first iteration of server meshing coming around mid-2022, The full version though is obviously much further away. Despite CIG dedicating an entire panel to explaining what server meshing is, they didn't touch on how far along they are with development or when players can expect to see any version of it. Ultimately then, the panel was information rich on a technical level, but lacked the insight into the current development timeframes that many people would like to see. For example, there's no information yet on how the nuances will function, whether battles containing hundreds of players will be even possible, if long-planned events such as Operation Pitchfork are still viable, and how player-owned bases will be handled across instances during attacks and defense. Many questions then remain unanswered. The Planet Tech Tools panel discussed, well, you guessed it, planetary tech. It seems very clear that the new Gen 12 renderer is going to be super important to the development of future planets. Essentially, the improved renderer means the planet tech can be pushed a lot further than currently. Perhaps one of the most interesting subjects about planet tech is the variety of visual elements that will be possible. This covers things such as seasons, as well as flora and fauna being generated correctly according to environmental conditions. Anyone who has watched my previous videos will be well aware that I believe Star Citizen planets are pretty much the best planets currently available in any space game. This went some way to explaining exactly why that is. Now further, CIG have always stated that as their planetary tool tech improves, the speed at which they can generate new environments and worlds will increase. Judging by the clips they put on display, it does indeed seem that this is now the case. For example, creating outposts appears to be very cost effective. Biomes appear to be preset to layer the correct environmental effects to all assets based upon weather conditions, so wet areas look wet basically, and dry areas look suitably weathered. All in all, this is very impressive and perhaps goes some way to explain why the world of Pyro 3, shown in the playthrough demo, looked so good. Now CIG also had a few ship presentations here, most of these for concept ships, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here in this video, but if there's a subject that interests you, then do check out the links in the video description below where you can see videos from other YouTubers. The reception to this year's CitizenCon has been very mixed, with many people being disappointed with various aspects of it, whilst also being impressed with other areas. The Pyro 3 demo, along with the new Planet Tech and Cloud Tech, has been almost universally praised by both the community as well as most of the gaming press. CIG made a great display of the technology, with the clouds in particular capturing the imagination of many. Meanwhile, the tech panels, as has been pointed out, contained great information, but perhaps went into far more depth than was needed. In terms of general progress on the game, many have questioned this particular aspect due to the lack of information. For example, neither Squadron 42, although CIG did say that ahead of time, nor Theatres of War were even mentioned, let alone discussed. CitizenCon has traditionally been a very flashy and showy affair, and this makes a lot of sense. The game is crowdfunded, and CitizenCon is a way to celebrate that, whilst giving something to the backers. It's also a great way for CIG to continue to drum up interest in the project and drive funding through new ship sales. This year was very different. With the event being digital only, it moved to a new format. Now personally, I felt that the new format worked very well indeed, and was generally much better. The keynote demo was right at the front of the event rather than at the end, and this was good news for anyone that wanted to see what is arguably the most interesting part. Meanwhile, the tech panels had vast amounts of information directly from the developers. Overall then, I felt this approach to be much better. Now, as I've already said, I was very impressed with the Pyro 3 demonstration. The new outposts looked fantastic, and they had a clear style to them that spoke of the life that exists in and around them. The Cloud and Planet Tech were also very nice indeed. I've said many times in the past, Star Citizen has easily the best planet tech in any space game. This is true today, and it looks like CIG plan to maintain that lead into the future. But that said, CitizenCon was far from perfect. Whilst the tech panels offered great insight into how CIG use various technology, they lacked information that would be truly interesting. For example, the server meshing panel offered plenty of insight into how the tech will work, and how CIG planned to use it. In fact, the panel felt like a technology lecture, and in a way, that is great. However, it lacked the most important part. It didn't inform us at what stage CIG are at with development on this technology. It gave no insight as to when it will be added into the game. Server meshing is key to the future of Star Citizen, so I'd fully expect CIG to have informed backers when the technology will be released, as well as to give status reports on when and where things are at today with development on this vital component of development. With server meshing have been delayed from its original planned release of 2018, backers are understandably anxious to hear where things currently stand. The rest of the tech panels generally followed the same layout, full of information but lacking any form of progress, insight or status updates. While some will argue that's why CIG publish a roadmap, CitizenCon is generally an important moment to demonstrate where things are at, whilst also providing a detailed update. Squadron 42 and Theatres of War were both notably absent, and while we were informed by CIG they wouldn't be talking about Squadron 42 at this year's CitizenCon, it's still a strange omission for such a major project. The last update on Squadron 42 came nearly a year ago, with Chris Roberts effectively stating it will be done when it's done, and no more has been heard about the project since then. With Squadron 42 now approaching 7 years past its original release date and no new release timeframe in sight, those who backed for the single-player campaign are understandably getting very anxious. Even showing just a new version of the Morrow Tour would help alleviate concerns whilst avoiding spoilers. Theatres of War, on the other hand, seems to be in similar limbo. No one outside of CIG seems to know when to expect it, and perhaps more importantly, no one outside of CIG seems to know precisely what form Theatres of War will actually take. Whilst I appreciate that CIG are putting together a very complex project here, that isn't an excuse for the lack of progress reports. In fact, I would argue that it's a strong reason to keep the backers up to date. Ultimately then, this year's CitizenCon managed to both impress and disappoint in almost equal levels. CIG tried a new format which worked very well, however it lacked the vital information that many people would want to hear. Meanwhile, the Pyro 3 demo was very impressive and likely will give people something to look forward to in the future. Although, that said, there were some elements that I do call into question, such as the NPC shop guy. At what moment the player shot him dead? How will that work in a multiplayer system or a multiplayer game? It seems as though that could be rather chaotic. What's to stop you shooting the NPC for another player, basically messing up their mission? So, a lot of questions there, essentially. Whilst I definitely would question some of the elements of the missions then, the overall tech behind it, the planetary tech and the outpost and all the rest of it there, certainly looked very nice. Do let me know your thoughts and feelings on the whole CitizenCon in the comments section below. Do you think CIG could have gone into more detail with status reports, or do you think it was perfectly fine the way they handled everything? If you have any other ideas and thoughts, do let me know. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.